Okay, so are you ready to tackle Leviticus? It's going to be a deep dive into ancient Israelite life and rituals, and you know what? Believe it or not, public health too.
Public health, that's not what usually comes to mind with Leviticus.
Right. But stick with us. It's there, trust me.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Our source for this deep dive is an audio version of the NIV UK translation from a YouTube channel called God's Able. Now, we're not aiming to turn anyone into a biblical scholar or anything like that.
Right.
More like uncovering the fascinating stuff that this book was trying to get across back then.
It's amazing how Leviticus, written like thousands of years ago, still, speaks to our human desire for meaning and connection to something bigger.
Yeah, for sure. And Leviticus wastes no time. It kicks off with tons of detail about offerings to God.
It's almost like they took an ancient cookbook and mixed it with religious practices.
I looked at that.
Super specific instructions on how to prepare, like everything. From animals to grain.
Yeah, like the burnt offerings. They'd sacrifice an animal from their herd or flock, even birds sometimes. And the text is really specific about it needing to be a male with no imperfections.
It makes you wonder why they were so insistent on perfection.
Yeah, what was that all about?
Probably because they saw the offering as a gift to God, so it had to be like the absolute best.
Makes sense.
It also gives you a glimpse into how much livestock meant to them. Back then, it was a prized possession.
Totally. Then you've got the grain offerings, flour, oil, incense.
Incense.
But absolutely no yeast or honey allowed.
That's interesting.
Why were they so against yeast and honey?
Good question. Yeast was often linked to fermentation and decay, which they probably saw as like a symbol of impurity.
So like the opposite of what they wanted.
Exactly. And honey, while sweet, can ferment too.
I see.
So leaving those out might have been their way of ensuring that the offering stayed pure and undefiled.
It's kind of wild how these little details tell us so much about their culture and what they believed.
Totally. And then you've got the fellowship offerings. These were meals shared with God.
Whoa, hold on a sec. A meal with God.
Yep. The text even mentions the specific cuts of meat to use. Can you imagine sitting down for dinner with the divine?
I don't even know what I'd say.
Right.
Okay, so picture this. You're back in ancient Israel. Which offering are you most drawn to and why?
Tough question. But for me, it's the fellowship offering.
Oh, why is that?
Because it shows how central community was to their faith. Like sharing a meal with God and everyone else would have created a powerful sense of unity and belonging.
I can see that. And it makes you think that this wasn't just about keeping God happy, right?
No, not at all.
These offerings were tied into everything. Their social structure, resource management, even like basic hygiene.
Exactly. Remember, this was way before refrigeration.
Oh, yeah, good point.
So yeah, the offerings had a practical side too. For example, by requiring a perfect, healthy animal for sacrifice, they probably helped prevent diseases from spreading.
That's smart. And what about sharing meat from the fellowship offerings?
That might have been a way to make sure everyone, even the poorest people, had something to eat.
So we've talked about offerings for honoring and thanking God.
Right.
But Leviticus is also about, like, what happens when you mess up?
Oh.
And that's where the sin offering comes in.
Leviticus is really all about purity and making things right with God, and the sin offering was a key part of that. They even made a distinction between intentional and unintentional sins, and the offerings varied depending on which one you committed.
Okay, so like accidentally breaking a religious rule would be an unintentional sin.
Exactly. And even then, what you offered depended on your social status. So a priest who sinned would have to bring a bull.
A bull.
Yeah, but a regular person could just bring a goat.
Okay, so a little less intense.
Right. And if you couldn't afford a goat, doves were acceptable. It was a system that tried to be fair to everyone, regardless of their wealth.
Like a sliding scale for atonement.
I like that.
But the sin ritual that everyone remembers has got to be the scapegoat, right?
Yeah, that was pretty out there.
Leviticus 16 goes into all the detail.
Yeah, they literally put all the community's sins onto a goat and sent it out into the wilderness.
Like a walking garbage bag of sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. It's a powerful image of purification and getting rid of sin.
Makes you wonder, are we still using scapegoats today?
Maybe without even realizing it.
Yeah, are there systems or groups of people that we unfairly blame for all our problems?
That's a question worth pondering.
It is. It makes you think about how we deal with responsibility and blame. Like, do we actually own up to our mistakes, or do we look for the easy way out?
Big questions for sure.
Okay, so we've covered offerings for different occasions and making things right when you've messed up.
Right.
But hold on, there's more. Leviticus lays down the law about food.
Oh, yes. Chapters 11 and 17 are packed with dietary rules.
Practice free.
Which animals are clean to eat, which are off limits, and the importance of draining all the blood. It's all there.
Okay, whoa, back up a sec.
Yeah.
Why so many rules about what they could eat?
Well, remember, this was a nomadic herding culture.
Right.
So the animals they liked, sheep and goats, were a good fit for their lifestyle.
Okay.
And the animals they considered unclean often had, practical problems associated with them.
Like what?
Well, pigs, for instance, are more prone to getting sick in hot climates.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And blood can carry diseases.
So it wasn't just about being picky eaters.
No, it was about staying healthy and safe in a world without modern medicine.
It's amazing how these ancient practices still have echoes today.
Right.
Like, millions of people still follow kosher and halal dietary laws, and vegetarianism and veganism a lot of times come from ethical concerns about how animals are treated.
It shows that the connection between what we eat and our well-being is something we still care about a lot.
Totally. And you know what? Leviticus doesn't stop at food.
Oh, no.
Get ready, because things are about to get really personal as we explore their ideas about purity.
Oh, boy.
This is where it gets interesting. Buckle up.
It's not just about what you eat, but what comes out of your body, too. There's a whole section about, bodily discharges and rituals for childbirth. Even instructions for dealing with mildew in your house.
Wait, they thought mildew could make you spiritually impure?
Purity was, super important to the ancient Israelites.
Okay.
It was about maintaining this state of wholeness. Being separate from anything considered polluting.
I see. So mildew was a big no-no.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they didn't mess around when it came to specifics.
Oh, I bet.
Chapter 15 goes into detail about male and female bodily fluids.
Wow. Okay. So was that just about hygiene, or was there a deeper meaning?
Hygiene definitely played a role, but remember, these practices were symbolic too. Bodily fluids were connected to life and death, so having all these rules around them was a way to maintain order and balance in their world.
Wow. So it wasn't just about ew, gross.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It was about their whole worldview.
It's amazing how these ancient beliefs give us a snapshot into how they saw the world.
Totally. And then there's chapter 13, which talks about skin diseases and how to treat them.
Skin diseases?
Yeah. It's like an early attempt at controlling contagious illnesses, way ahead of its time.
So out of all these purity rules, which one is the most surprising to you?
I think the mildew rules are pretty fascinating.
Really? Why?
They show how much they cared about purity. It wasn't just about personal hygiene, but the cleanliness of their homes, too.
So it was a community thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests that purity wasn't just for individuals, but something that impacted everyone's health and well-being.
It's like taking care of your neighborhood.
Kinda, yeah. And speaking of community well-being, Leviticus has some interesting things to say about land rest and even economic fairness.
Okay, I'm listening.
Chapters 25 and 26 talk about land ownership, the Sabbath year, and this thing called the Jubilee. Pretty radical ideas for their time.
Break it down for me. What were those all about?
Okay, so the Sabbath year was a time for the land to rest.
To rest.
Yeah, imagine letting your fields just lie fallow for a whole year.
Like a forced vacation for the earth.
Exactly. It might have been rooted in ecological and spiritual ideas, ensuring the land's fertility and acknowledging that God owned it all.
Wow, that's a whole other level of respect for nature.
Right. But even more radical was the Jubilee, which happened every 50 years. Debts were forgiven, and if you had to sell your land because you were poor, you could get it back.
Whoa, hold on. So it was like a built-in system for wealth redistribution.
You got it.
No.
It shows how deeply they cared about social justice and making sure everyone had a chance to thrive.
It's amazing how these ancient ideas connect to what we're talking about today, like sustainability, economic fairness, even those digital detox periods we hear about.
It's like a modern-day Sabbath.
Right. It shows that we still wrestle with these ideas of balance between work and rest, personal wealth, and the well-being of the community.
Absolutely. It's a timeless struggle.
Okay, so we've talked about purity and fairness, but Leviticus doesn't stop there. It also lays down the law for the leaders, the priests. They had their own set of rules and the expectations were high.
The priest was like a pivotal figure in Israelite society. The go-between for God and the people. Their actions carried a lot of weight.
So it makes sense that there were specific rules just for them.
Exactly. Like who they could marry. It wasn't just about finding a nice girl next door.
Oh no. What else did they have to consider?
The ritual purity of their family line. It was a big deal.
So it wasn't just about love and compatibility.
It was about maintaining that holiness we talked about, remember? Especially for priests. They handled the sacred, communed with the divine. So the rules about marriage diet, even how they looked, were all about preserving that holiness.
It's interesting how it wasn't just about avoiding bad things, but actively working towards a state of purity.
You're right. It's not just, don't be unclean.
Yeah.
They had specific rituals for cleansing themselves if they did become unclean.
Like what kind of rituals?
Think back to the ones we talked about earlier. The birds, cedarwood hyssop, and scarlet yarn.
Okay, yeah, I remember.
These weren't just hygiene practices. They were symbolic acts of restoring wholeness and a right relationship with God.
It's like those rituals connected their physical actions to a deeper spiritual reality.
Exactly. A physical manifestation of an internal change.
It shows how interconnected body and spirit were in their worldview.
For sure. Purity wasn't just physical. It was a reflection of your spiritual alignment with God.
And this emphasis on purity went beyond just the priests, right?
Oh yeah. It extended to the whole community. We see it in the detailed rules about bodily discharges, skin diseases, even purifying homes after certain events.
Like they were trying to create a sacred space.
Exactly. Not just in the temple, but in their daily lives and interactions.
Which raises an interesting question. How did they treat people who were considered outside the community? Were foreigners held to the same standards?
It's complicated. On the one hand, Leviticus emphasizes the Israelites as God's chosen people set apart from other nations.
But there are also passages that talk about treating foreigners with compassion and justice.
Right. Leviticus 19 is very clear about that. It says, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God."
That's a pretty powerful message of empathy and inclusion.
It is. It highlights the tension between wanting order and distinction while also being called to love and compassion for everyone.
A tension that we still struggle with today.
Absolutely.
Speaking of tough questions, Leviticus doesn't shy away from some challenging social issues.
It tackles things like sexual morality, violence, and justice. It's like a whole code of conduct for their community.
And some of those laws can be pretty hard to hear from a modern perspective, like the punishments for adultery or homosexuality.
It's important to remember the historical and cultural context. The ancient world had a very different understanding of these issues.
So how do we approach these passages without condoning harmful or discriminatory views?
I think it's about engaging with these texts critically, acknowledging the historical context while also recognizing how they challenge our modern understanding of ethics and morality. It's a delicate balance.
It is, but it's a balance we have to try and find if we want to understand these ancient texts and how they still speak to us today. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Leviticus, the idea of atonement. It's not enough to just admit you did wrong. You have to make things right, restore balance.
Atonement is at the very core of Leviticus. It's about fixing that broken relationship between humanity and God, between people and their community.
And we see it throughout the book, from the sin offerings to the detailed instructions for purifying yourself from uncleanliness.
The sacrificial system played a huge role in atonement. Offering a perfect, unblemished animal was like giving something precious to restore balance and atone for wrongdoing.
It's interesting how these rituals linked the physical act of sacrifice to a deeper spiritual truth.
They were a physical expression of repentance and that longing for reconciliation.
And this idea of atonement wasn't just about personal forgiveness. It had a community dimension, too.
Absolutely. Remember the scapegoat ritual, where all the community's sins were symbolically placed on a goat and sent away.
Oh, yeah. That one's hard to forget.
It's a powerful image of the community seeking collective purification and forgiveness.
So Leviticus is this complex system of rules and rituals, all aimed at creating a society that's both physically and spiritually healthy. A society where individuals and the community as a whole can live in right relationship with God and each other.
It's a vision that, while challenging and sometimes even unsettling from our modern perspective, offers a glimpse into the human search for meaning, belonging, and reconciliation.
It's incredible to think that a book written thousands of years ago can still raise such relevant and thought-provoking questions for us today.
It reminds us that the human experience in all its complexities and contradictions transcends time and place. The challenges faced by the ancient Israelites, their struggles with sin, their yearning for purity and atonement, these are themes that still resonate with us today.
And that's the beauty of diving deep into these ancient texts. They offer a mirror for us to reflect on our own lives, values, and how we seek meaning in a world that's not always easy to understand.
It's a journey of discovery, not just about the past, but about ourselves, and the timeless questions that continue to shape the human experience.
It's amazing how these ancient texts can still speak to us across the millennia.
They really can.
You know, as we've been unpacking Leviticus, it's struck me that it's not just a book about rules.
That's interesting. What do you mean?
It's a book about relationships.
That's a great point. At its core, Leviticus is about the relationship between humanity and the divine, between individuals and their community, and even between humans and the natural world.
Yes. It's like this intricate web of interconnectedness where every action has consequences, not just for you, but for the whole fabric of society.
Exactly. The rules and rituals we've been talking about are all about maintaining harmony and balance within this web of relationships.
And that brings us to another key theme in Leviticus, the idea of blessings and curses.
Oh yeah, it's a big one.
It's like a built-in system of cause and effect where obedience to God's laws brings blessings while disobedience leads to curses.
Leviticus 26 spells it out pretty clearly.
Yeah.
It reminds us that our choices have consequences both for ourselves and for those around us.
It almost reads like a contract between God and the Israelites with specific terms and conditions for both sides.
It does, and those stipulations are very specific. If the Israelites follow God's commands, they'll be blessed with abundance, peace, and protection.
Sounds pretty good.
But if they turn away from God and disobey His laws, they'll face a whole bunch of curses, including disease, famine, war, and exile.
Yikes. Talk about high stakes.
It shows how seriously they took their covenant with God. It wasn't just a casual agreement. It was a binding pact that had huge implications for their well-being.
It's fascinating how those blessings and curses touch on every aspect of their lives. From how fertile their land is to their relationships with their enemies, even their personal health and wealth.
It reflects a holistic worldview where the spiritual and physical are totally intertwined. Their obedience to God's laws wasn't just about earning rewards or avoiding punishment. It was about living in alignment with the divine order of creation.
And that idea of living in alignment with the divine order goes beyond just following the rules, right?
Definitely. It also means cultivating certain virtues and character traits.
Like what?
Throughout Leviticus, we see an emphasis on qualities like holiness, justice, compassion, and generosity.
So it's not just about outward compliance, it's about an inward transformation.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a heart that's aligned with God's will, reflecting His love and compassion.
Leviticus, this book that's often misunderstood, turns out to be a rich tapestry of laws, rituals, and ethical teachings all woven together to show what it means to live in a right relationship with God, with each other, and with the world around us.
It's a testament to the enduring human quest for meaning, purpose, and connection. A quest that continues to resonate with us today.
And as we conclude our deep dive into Leviticus, I hope you're left with a sense of wonder and curiosity about this ancient text and the insights it offers into the human experience. Maybe it's even sparked some questions about your own beliefs, values, and the rules that guide your life. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. And until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it really is amazing how much these ancient ideas still resonate with us today.
It's like we're looking back in time and seeing ourselves reflected in their struggles and hopes. But Leviticus isn't just about looking inward.
Right.
There's also this outward focus on how our actions impact the world around us.
You're right. Leviticus is really concerned with how the Israelites interact with nature, especially when it comes to farming and land use.
Like those rules about the Sabbath year and the Jubilee that we talked about before.
Exactly. Letting the land rest, returning property to its original owners. It wasn't just about economics. It was about respecting the land and recognizing its inherent value.
So they saw themselves as caretakers of the land.
Yes, stewards, responsible for its care and well-being.
Makes you think about how we treat the environment today. Are we being good stewards? Are we taking care of this planet for the generations to come?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
It is. Leviticus challenges us to think about sustainability, not just for the environment, but for our social and economic systems too.
For sure.
So we've covered a lot of ground: the sacrificial system, the focus on purity and holiness, and even the importance of social justice and caring for the environment.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But amidst all these rules and regulations, is there like a main message, a core principle that ties it all together?
I think there is. At its heart, Leviticus is a call to live a life that's wholly just and compassionate. It's about aligning ourselves with God's will, not just through rituals and offerings, but through everything we do, our relationships, even our thoughts.
That's a pretty challenging goal.
It is, but it's also an inspiring vision of what it means to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. It reminds us that our faith isn't just a personal thing. It affects how we treat each other, how we care for the world, and how we work towards a more just and fair society.
So Leviticus, this ancient book that some people see as just a bunch of outdated rules, actually turns out to be super relevant and challenging.
It really does.
It speaks to the depths of human experience, urging us to live with intention, purpose, and a deep sense of responsibility for ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. I think that sums it up perfectly.
It's been an amazing journey exploring Leviticus with you. I hope everyone listening has gained a new appreciation for this ancient text and the insights it offers into what it means to be human.
Me too. It's been a pleasure.
And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to discover in the Bible. So until next time, keep searching, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.